What started out as a serious meeting became an opportunity for them to have a private conversation. There were similar scenes in Breaking Bad. This is because the protagonists, once they experienced the thrill of breaking the rules, became increasingly addicted to these activities. It was their inability to control this desire that led them down an increasingly narrow path in life. To have more interactions with Kim, Jimmy accepted DM law firm's generous invitation against his own will. The firm's benefits were excellent, and Jimmy's expected income was very ideal. He even began discussing buying a house and getting married with Kim. They were looking forward to a beautiful future. At this moment, Jimmy suddenly remembered he had to go to the nail salon to pick up the Mercedes-Benz the firm sent him. Hearing this, Kim couldn't help but feel envious, but she was still happy for Jimmy. She even gave Jimmy a beautifully wrapped gift. It was a mug with the words "World's Second Best Lawyer" printed on it. This parallels an episode of Breaking Bad where Jesse and Walter first go out to the countryside to produce contraband. Jesse made fun of Walter for being number 2 in the world. This mug would also become an important prop in Jimmy and Kim's relationship. Bidding farewell to the Suzuki that had accompanied him for many years, Jimmy switched to the brand new Mercedes-Benz provided by the firm. The customers at the nail salon eyed Jimmy's luxury car with envy, and Mrs. Nguyen at the door couldn't stand it and told them to go back inside. Seeing Jimmy's smug look, Mrs. Nguyen refused his attempt at a farewell hug. Jimmy then got into the car and was overjoyed by the luxurious interior. However, when Jimmy opened the sunroof, he probably remembered his dark history with that sunroof incident in Chicago and quickly closed it. The only thing that displeased him was that the cup holder couldn't fit the mug Kim gave him. Ignoring this, he hurried off to work. At DM law firm, Jimmy reported his work progress to his boss, Clifford. He discovered that the documents submitted by Sandpiper Crossing's defense attorney indicated that the unfair allowance plan was voluntarily chosen by the clients. But according to Jimmy's statistics, all the clients chose this option, which seemed more like a mandatory condition. Jimmy suggested using this point to refute the opposition but needed some facts to support it. Clifford agreed with Jimmy's idea and asked him to follow up on the case as soon as possible. Since the Sandpiper Crossing case was large in scale, DM law firm was partnering with HHM law firm on it. This allowed Jimmy and Kim to sit in on meetings together. Jimmy, as a key player in the case, reported the recent work progress at the meeting. Just then, a staff member suddenly walked in with a storage box. Jimmy had a bad feeling. The staff member reported the situation to Howard, who then interrupted Jimmy's presentation and asked everyone to place all electronic devices in the box. It was clear that Chuck was going to attend the meeting, because prior to this, Howard had visited Chuck, informing him about Jimmy's work at DM law firm. Since both firms were collaborating on the Sandpiper Crossing case, the clients only wanted to deal with Jimmy, so Clifford brought Jimmy on board. Chuck reluctantly admitted that Jimmy was indeed good at handling interpersonal relationships, but he wondered if Clifford didn't care about Jimmy's work and educational background. Howard said he was very objective in telling Clifford about Jimmy's experience, but Clifford didn't care about that and gave Jimmy the status of a partner. To distance himself from helping Jimmy, Howard claimed that Kim put in a lot of effort on this matter. Howard did this to protect his firm's interests and avoid conflict with his partner Chuck. Secretly recommending Jimmy to join DM was also a move to quickly resolve the Sandpiper Crossing case and bring benefits to the firm. Hearing this, Chuck, who was in the mood to play the piano, now stared at the metronome in deep thought, deciding to make a comeback. On the surface, Chuck was there to observe the progress of the case, but in reality, he wanted to overshadow Jimmy. Sure enough, Chuck's arrival completely disrupted Jimmy's train of thought during his presentation. Chuck's look seemed to be waiting for Jimmy to make a fool of himself. Kim noticed Jimmy's concern and placed her hand on his thigh for encouragement. With Kim's support, Jimmy quickly regained his composure and succinctly reported his recent work, even making everyone laugh with his humor at the end. After the meeting, Chuck took the initiative to greet Jimmy. This was the first time the brothers had spoken since their fallout. Jimmy asked Chuck why he was there, and Chuck proudly said that his name was on the building. Chuck seemed to be asserting his sovereignty. After Howard leaves, Jimmy continues to ask Chuck what he's doing here. Chuck said he wanted to witness certain things firsthand. The usually humorous Jimmy had nothing to say. Just then, Jimmy's phone call interrupted their awkward conversation. It was Mike calling because Price's troubles hadn't been resolved. The police were onto this ordinary citizen with a big Hummer to solve Price's problem and protect himself. Mike asked Jimmy for help. The scene then shifted to Jimmy accompanying Price to the police station for questioning. Faced with the police interrogation, Price stumbled over his words. Afraid of giving the police any incriminating evidence, Price said he had hired a private investigator to recover his baseball cards, so the case could be closed, and the police could focus on other things, but the police weren't ready to let it go because they discovered a hidden compartment under Price's couch, making them believe he was definitely up to something. Seeing the situation clearly, Jimmy decisively asked Price to go out, and he dealt with the police as Price's personal legal advisor. Jimmy got straight to the point, saying, "You're only here to help my client because you discovered the hidden compartment under his couch." Jimmy acknowledged that it was normal for the police to suspect Price but assured them that Price hadn't done anything illegal. Hearing this, Salerno questioned why Price was sweating if he hadn't done anything wrong. At this point, Jimmy began to orchestrate a story. He subtly hinted that Price used the hidden compartment to store some private art pieces. Salerno was puzzled about what kind of art needed to be hidden so discreetly. Jimmy explained that it was part of a transaction between Price and a wealthy individual. Price provided personal videos, and in return, he received financial support. However, the relationship soured, and the other party took Price's videos and baseball cards, similar to how lovers quarrel and then reconcile. Salerno assumed it was explicit adult content. Jimmy denied this, saying it was merely a fetish video with no illegal content and that everyone in the video was fully clothed. Hearing this, the police were even more puzzled and asked what exactly was involved. Reluctantly, Jimmy said the client referred to it as squat cobbler. This left the officers utterly confused, as they had never heard of such a thing. Jimmy elaborated further, explaining it in a way that made it sound like something normal people would find hard to accept. The police were astonished that this seemingly ordinary guy would be involved in such activities. After resolving the issue, Price admired Jimmy's resourcefulness, but for safety, Jimmy needed Price to cooperate and record some squat cobbler videos to satisfy the police's inspection. That evening, Jimmy shared a few boxes of cakes with Kim, recounting the day's events and how he defended Price. They chatted and laughed until Kim realized the cakes were props for Price's fetish video. Seeing Kim stop, Jimmy quickly explained that these were extra props for the video and assured her they had never been used. However, Jimmy misunderstood Kim's concern. She was worried because Jimmy had fabricated evidence. As a lawyer, being caught fabricating evidence could cost him his career. Jimmy insisted it wasn't a real case and that he did it for free. Kim was even more baffled and asked why Jimmy would do such a thing. Jimmy said he was just helping a friend. Kim said, "It seems this friend of yours must be so important that you're willing to risk losing your job by fabricating evidence." Not wanting to explain further, Jimmy said it was over and no one would find out. Kim warned Jimmy that he was playing with fire and that it would eventually backfire. But this was the kind of thing Jimmy excelled at. Kim sternly told Jimmy never to do it again, and Jimmy hesitated. Seeing Kim's serious expression, Jimmy reluctantly agreed. "Do you think he'll listen to Kim?" A tour bus driving down the road suddenly pulled over, and the driver lied, claiming the bus had broken down and needed a quick repair, asking the elderly passengers to wait a moment. However, as soon as the driver opened the hood, Slippin' Jimmy, who had been waiting, walked over and handed the driver a bill. The driver gave him only 5 minutes. This was more than enough for the smooth-talking Jimmy, because all the passengers were clients of the Sandpiper Crossing nursing home. To quickly get their authorization, Jimmy found a shortcut to success. With his humorous and charming speech, he quickly built rapport with the clients. It's undeniable that Jimmy was an absolute genius in sales. In the end, he achieved his goal, with all the elderly passengers cooperating with Jimmy to submit their claims. In just 3 short weeks, Jimmy managed to secure over 200 clients, earning high praise from Clifford. Everyone listened intently to Jimmy's progress report, except for Chuck, who questioned Jimmy's methods. He thinks that Jimmy's ability to get so many clients in such a short period of time is likely to lead the defense to suspect Jimmy of abetting. Jimmy denied this, but Chuck insisted he just wanted to know how Jimmy would explain it if it came up. But this couldn't stump the clever Jimmy. He effortlessly made up a lie that sounded like the truth to everyone else. However, Chuck knew exactly what kind of tricks Jimmy was up to. Jimmy noticed that Kim seemed upset, so they had a private conversation, but Kim didn't respond to him. Jimmy realized the seriousness of the issue and then interrupted the others to express his agreement with Chuck's viewpoint. He'll do the rest of the work in a different way to avoid the suspicion that he's abetting the client. After saying this, Jimmy quickly glanced at Kim, hoping for her forgiveness. After the meeting, Kim was still upset, and Jimmy hurried after her. Kim asked Jimmy to tell the truth. Jimmy said he just did what needed to be done and achieved excellent results. Apparently Jimmy didn't realize his mistake and was risking disbarment by doing what he did. Kim warned him not to handle work this way again, because Kim had vouched for him at DM law firm. If Jimmy did anything inappropriate, it would affect her as well. When Jimmy returned to DM law firm, Omar reported that none of the letters they sent to over 200 clients had received a reply. Clearly, Sandpiper Crossing Nursing Home had intercepted the letters. Jimmy quickly devised a counter-strategy. After work, Jimmy stopped Clifford, who was about to go home, and reported his suspicions to him. Not only that, but Jimmy also provided a solution, using TV ads to get the information to the clients. Moreover, Jimmy had already figured out the TV programs that Sandpiper Crossing regularly played for their clients. Jimmy was confident in this plan, but Clifford mentioned that they had tried advertising a few years ago with disappointing results. However, he didn't completely dismiss Jimmy's idea and said they would discuss it next week. Jimmy asked Omar to play their previous ad, which turned out to be just text and narration with the highlight being a wavy effect. Jimmy exasperatedly asked what kind of ad that was and where the performance was. He decided to make the ad his way, so Jimmy called in the college students he had previously worked with in film. With his natural directing talent, Jimmy arranged the script for the ad, expressing exactly the effect he wanted, aiming for the best outcome at the lowest cost. Because the company hadn't approved the ad, Jimmy had to pay for it out of his own pocket, and the actors were clients he had previously helped. After shooting the ad, Jimmy showed the final cut to Kim. He asked Kim to pretend to be a Sandpiper Crossing client and give genuine feedback on the ad.
My husband and I scrimped and saved for so many years. We did our best to build a nest egg so that we wouldn't be a burden to our family. After Ronald passed, I moved to an assisted living facility, a nice place. They told me they'd take care of everything, but then one day they said all my money was gone. How could that be? Where did it all go?
That's not a real tear, is it?
If you or a loved one
It's
is a resident of a Sandpiper Crossing facility or other associated retirement community, you may be eligible to receive compensation. For a free consultation, call the law offices of Davis and Maine at 505-242-7700. That's 505-242-7700.
After watching it, Kim was highly impressed with Jimmy's professional directing skills and said if she were a client, she would call for more information, but Kim misunderstood Jimmy's intention. She thought the ad had already been approved by Clifford and was surprised by it. However, Jimmy didn't correct Kim's misunderstanding. The next day at work, Jimmy hesitated about whether to take the ad to Clifford for approval. He went to Clifford's office door but turned back. Jimmy decided to act first and get approval later, so he called the TV station's ad placement department and had Omar urgently send the ad over. During the wait, Jimmy appeared anxious, worried about the ad's effectiveness. The picture on the wall of a man slipping hinted at Jimmy's fate. Just like the painting Walter often saw in Breaking Bad, it symbolized Walter drifting away from his family. Jimmy had Omar ready with a plan to handle the incoming calls, and then he waited in his office for the ad to air. When the call didn't come in, Jimmy began to work his usual magic. Sure enough, Jimmy's ad worked, and colleagues began receiving calls from Sandpiper Crossing clients one after another. However, in the evening when Jimmy and Kim were watching a film at home, Clifford called. Jimmy expected Clifford to praise him, but instead, Clifford was furious. Clifford was extremely unhappy with Jimmy's actions and demanded that he bring the ad to his office first thing in the morning. After speaking, Clifford angrily hung up the phone. Jimmy didn't want Kim to know he had been scolded, so he pretended to have a cheerful conversation with Clifford for Kim to hear.
Golden boy.
That's me.
However, Jimmy didn't realize that trouble was looming.